The microphone was off. Okay, let's try this again. Okay, so tonight's the live, I want to do Q&A as we have been doing. We took a little bit of a break for the holidays. But I want to kick off addressing a few strange comments that Colby made about me. I think this was the first time in a live where he's actually mentioned me by name. He's kind of beaten around the bush, like, people on the internet, make claims like Tylee wasn't at my wedding when they don't know, but he's never actually named me. And this time he actually named me. So they were strange, but some of them were bordering on bizarre. So I don't want to go tit for tat, but I do want to address a couple things and correct a couple things. And then there was a detail about the wedding. I had said I'm not going to talk about the wedding anymore. I've already made my case, but there was something interesting in the live, so I will address that. So, all right, having said that, pull this over. Whoop. Let me change my view. Okay.
Did Tylee know Annie Cushing? No. No. She did not. Simple no.
Okay. I'm going to play the rest of it. It's only a few seconds more, but he kicks off this question with, it's not even a clever lie. It's just a weird lie. Like, first of all, I do not believe that anyone is 5 plus years in now, anyone is actually asking if Tylee knew me. I think that's pretty well established. So I do suspect that these questions are actually coming from Colby instead of like an actual person. I suspect that girl is that Colby and probably one of his sock puppets or someone he's set up to ask, because it's strange. Like, no one's asking this. And, and so he's kind of kicking off, and he even says, well, that's simple. No, Tylee didn't know Annie Cushing. Well, I stayed in her home with her for 4 days. And as far as I remember, she only left one time for, I forgot what that's called, seminary, I think. It was like a religious class she went to. But because she was homeschooled, and I use that term very loosely, she didn't even go to school. Like, she just hung out with us the whole time. And Colby was there too. Like, he came by twice, and then Lori and I worked out with him. So it's just a very strange statement. But he does kind of circle back and change it a little bit.
Yeah, that's a whole nother situation we will not get into, because it's just not worth it. It's literally not worth it. I don't think it's worth it. But no, she did not know her almost at all.
Okay, well, I'll finish it.
So take that for what it is.
Okay, so he says that Tylee didn't know me, and then he makes a bunch of statements as if like he's under duress answering this question that, again, I strongly suspect these are his own questions that he's posing as just like a reason to talk about me by name. But then he circles back and is like, oh, she hardly knew her. And that just supports what I've said from day one. In fact, I've talked about this in other lives, but early on, before I ever had any intention of going public, a reporter was trying to get me to make a public statement, and in trying to pressure me, one of the things that he said was Tylee needs a champion. And I told him, I'm not that champion. I hardly knew Tylee. So I have said that from day one. I only came forward like, I think it was like 7 or 8 weeks in, because no one else was advocating for Tylee. So anyway, so it was just, it was a very strange comment. All right, moving on to the next one.
I'm going to answer this question. No.
This is the same person, that girl, 1007.
I don't even, I've seen Annie 3 times in my entire life. So I'm just going to leave that out there.
Okay. Again, it's just strange. I really don't think, again, 5 years in, I don't think anyone's asking if we were close. I mean, this has been so well established. Excuse me. But he's incorrect saying he's only seen me 3 times his whole life. He saw me 2002, 2004, 2007, 2018, 3 different times in 2018, because when I was staying there, he came by twice, and then Lori and I worked out with him. 2023, 2024. So even if I condense the 3 times, even though he was like literally, that's twice as many as he said. Again, it doesn't matter, but it's just strange. It just seems like he wants a reason to talk about me, and he seems pretty dramatic in both of those references. Like, there are these like dramatic, and Colby's always been a dramatic kid. He was a dramatic kid. He's a dramatic adult. That's fine. But there's like this dramatic pause, and he looks at the camera. He goes all kind of Jim Halpert, like, look how sad I am and how mad I am when I talk about Annie Cushing, and I'm making these definitive yet very strange comments. And again, they're just things that I just don't think anyone is talking about. But anyway, okay. Oh yeah, this was actually a picture that I captured from the 2018 visit. It was just to send my kids a picture, because the last time they had seen Colby, he was 11. Okay, so the last one, this one was very interesting to me, even though it's just kind of more of the same in terms of that Tylee was at their wedding, but there's a different, there's a twist to it. So
And once we decided we wanted to get married, which let's just address this right now. If I need to go find the USB, I will, because we've had this misconception. This is its whole own thing. But we talked about this before in another live. The whole misconception about Tylee not being at our wedding still pisses me off to this day. Tylee was at our wedding. I don't understand what is there not to understand. She was there. We have pictures of her there. There's a bunch of people who go on the internet who want to talk like they were there. If you weren't there, then what are you talking about, bro?
okay, so what is different about this one? So you'll notice Colby was very careful not to commit to show these pictures that they supposedly have of Tylee at their wedding. He just says they're on a jump drive. He calls it a USB. That's fine. He's not a technical guy. But he says he has them on this USB. Now, one, keep in mind, these are pictures of their wedding. You know, like, they weren't married in 1990. Like, they were married in 2018. Yeah, so they most likely, not only would they have an album with these pictures, they most likely also have them online. If they're not still on the photographer's website, they probably have them on Dropbox or Google Drive or something like that, because it wouldn't be wise to just have your photos on a jump drive. But that's neither here nor there. He's like, if I have to go and find them, I'll do it. If I have to go and get them. Well, again, I mean, they've had 5 years to do this, and they haven't provided this proof. And they didn't even start saying that Tylee was at the wedding until someone produced a contrived photo. It was a bad Photoshop job, and they picked a picture of Tylee that was too young, where she was too young. It wasn't how she looked in 2018, and I eventually debunked this photograph. But when this photograph started floating out there, that's when Colby and Kelsey changed their tune to, it was no longer she was on this ski trip, which is what they said. It was now she was totally at our wedding. But then the photo was debunked. So they're not like hanging their hat on that photo. Now they're just saying, like, it's almost like this contrived outrage. Like, I don't know what's so hard to understand. She was at our wedding, et cetera, et cetera. Colby was very careful not to actually commit to providing the proof, but Kelsey in the comments was not. So I circled it, but there's kind of a line through it. But she was in the chat and she said, "We'll post videos, LOL." And so I thought that was really interesting, and that was worth bringing up, because that's the first time that they've actually committed to providing evidence that Tylee was at the wedding. Now, again, they had a Netflix documentary. That was like the ideal time to provide this picture, or pictures, or videos, or whatever, because like that whole documentary, that was all theirs. Those pictures were all theirs, well, for the most part, So, anyway, so I think it's been about a week now. So far, I haven't heard of them posting these videos, but I will monitor this. I'll be very surprised if they actually do. Like, I think it would be great. Yeah, like if you have these videos, you have these pictures, well, like we've been talking about this for 5 years now. First in the Facebook groups, and now they're addressing it publicly. But it's just strange. Like these pictures would be very easy to produce, and as I've said before, Lori showed me their album. It was all online. We went through the whole album, and that's why I asked Lori, why isn't Tylee in any of the pictures? And that's when she said she wasn't there. She had to work. Now, another thing that he says that's interesting is, and he kind of harps on this, like, you weren't there. So he's kind of talking like broadly, but really he's addressing me. You weren't there, so you don't know. And I don't want to get pedantic. So I haven't addressed this before, but there is a leap of logic with that. It's just kind of like if I were to talk about the fires raging in LA right now, obviously, like, someone wouldn't stop me and be like, were you there? Then you don't know. You don't know what's going on. If you aren't there, you don't know about these fires. And so, I mean, obviously, that's kind of the point of reporting. So I'm, and so he tries to dismiss it like, people on the internet, they try to make these statements, and he wants to address it as like they're just trying to cause drama and stuff. But I did have a first person account. Like, I'm not just, I mean, I'm barely, like, barely, like, I'm not close to any of these people. I've never claimed to be close to any of these people. However, I'm not the same as like just some rando on the internet making a claim. I brought this up in a Facebook group because something came up. I don't even remember the context now, but I was like, yeah, Tylee wasn't at their wedding, and and so and that I got from Lori. And then also with my own eyes, we went through all these photos, and there were no pictures with Tylee in it. And we're not just talking about, like, they weren't just like the family photos. It was, the entire wedding album. So anyway, but even if we want to hit on that point, like, okay, so you don't know because you weren't there. Obviously, there are issues with that logic. But someone who was there and was his best man also confirmed in this Facebook group that Tylee wasn't there. Now, his explanation was that she was at girls' camp. I've since found out they don't have girls' camp in January, so I don't know why he would have said that, but what Lori had told me was that Tylee had to work. So this person, it was Zach, had said, well, no, she was at girls' camp. And then Colby and Kelsey, well, Kelsey specifically, was the one who introduced, no, she was on a ski trip. So there is this quote by Judge Judy that I think is a little oversimplified, but she was like, if it doesn't make sense, it's not true. Now, there are a lot of things in this case that don't make sense, and they're actually true. But in this case, if it doesn't make sense, like if there are so many different accounts, and sometimes by the same people, it's probably not true. Like it doesn't, none of this makes sense. But anyway, so I did just want to point out that Kelsey has said that they would post videos. So there we go. Okay. On that note, I will open it up with Q&A, and I think there was maybe just one. Okay. Yeah, I think there was there were two questions from the previous live. I can turn this off. Okay. I don't know why I added this circle. Yeah. Anyway. Okay. Do you have thoughts about Lori cross-examining her mom, sister, and brother? That could be interesting information. I really want to know more from Summer. She knows a lot. Yeah, so a few things about that. And it's interesting because that was from the last live. But we just found out today was the first time Lori actually represented herself in a hearing. And Summer and Janice, who did not attend Lori's trial, has not been there for her in any capacity. Summer didn't make a public statement like, asking Judge Boyce to have mercy or anything like that. And Janice even went so far in the documentary, which I was really surprised. This was the Netflix documentary. She had previously, she and Summer had defended Lori, but then she swung the other extreme. So this was before Lori even, had her trial. She was like, I said that I didn't think that Lori could murder her children or kill her children, something like that. And I was wrong. So here, Lori hasn't even stood trial yet. And Janice is saying definitively, yes, my daughter killed her children. And so anyway, so they all really distanced themselves. Everyone has distanced themselves from Lori. Now, here Lori is representing herself. And I think across the board, I think people are freaking out. I actually think that's part of the reason why Colby is a little fixated on me right now. I think that, and this part I do feel, I mean, I'm annoyed by it, by some of it, but also I still do feel compassion for him, because I can only imagine what must be going through his mind right now, because he was largely very protected, and rightly so, like in in these trials. And Lori extended the scepter of her protection. So, Jim Archibald, really treated him with kid gloves, didn't go after him like he did, some of the other witnesses for the state. But at that point, Lori was still enamored with him. Like, she was, she visibly just happy when she saw him, and, things like that. But now there's a big question mark. And, like I've said, I think that there is the possibility, a strong possibility, given the timing of everything, that Lori representing herself is in part a reaction to that interview that Colby did with Lori. So I'm sure he and others who have details out there that they don't want to be public, and now they are actually going to be questioned by her. And as we all have seen, like, Lori is a psychopath. She has very, in my opinion, she really seemingly has very little regard for other people's feelings and stuff. And so, I'm sure Colby, I think that that's probably part of what is motivating some of this, because for the most part, YouTubers and the media, they've given Colby a pass. Like, if there are details that are uncomfortable, they just don't share them, and that's fine. That's that's their choice. But now I think, because I have shared those things, even though, like, I've tried to do it with as much gentility as possible, and integrity. I'm sure in Colby's mind, it's like, okay, I need to discredit this woman before more information comes out and she actually reports on it. So I suspect that's where some of this is coming from. But what we found out today was that Summer and Janice actually were at this hearing. Like, this was like a nothing hearing, and yet they were there. And so I suspect this is the first evidence of both of them kissing the ring, because Lori can destroy them. They were both, even from the little bit of information we have from the FOIA docs, Summer and Janice were all up in the seemingly in the plot to murder Charles. That's what the evidence that we've seen so far suggests. So I thought that was interesting, and apparently it was reported that Lori turned and smiled at them on her way out. So I suspect right now Lori is feeling very powerful. This was the first hit of crack for her, that people are shaking in their boots. Like, she is no longer just this punching bag where everyone's talking to the media and they're, talking about how messed up Lori was and what a psycho she was, and how distant they were from this entire crisis and these crimes. Now they are all going to have to talk to Lori directly, and anyway, so yeah, I think that cross-examination, with Summer and Janice, now it might be a little more of a crapshoot. I have heard that Janice was the only one in touch with her. That was when she was in Idaho. I don't know if that has changed. But yeah, so who knows? I mean, it's really anyone's guess. Yeah. And they're not going to make people's calls public for no reason. So I suspect there may be people who are trying to mend the fence and hope that Lori doesn't eviscerate them. But yeah, Adam, I think she's going to shred him on the stand. So I don't think she will have any mercy on Adam. Colby is a coin toss. I think she may want to, get the last word in, teach him a lesson, that kind of thing. But who knows? They may also reconcile over the phone, or she might have, pity on him in the end. But she has access. A lot of these records that we know that law enforcement collected, like we know that law enforcement got a dump of Kay's phone, and I mean, she was so concerned that there was a ruling that Lori wasn't to have access to Kay's phone, only her attorneys could. But now that she's her own attorney, I'm sure she gets access to everything. But, so, and then there is a mention in the FOIA docs that they captured text messages between Colby and Tylee, but then also, these people, they just weren't very careful. Everyone was using burner phones. But the thing is, Lori knows who used which burner phone, and these people were surprisingly not careful in their text communication. Like even just seeing some of the things that Summer put in writing, I imagine they're all kind of freaking out right now, because I don't think anyone had this on their Vallow Daybell bingo card. Okay. Do you know who would have the authority to obtain Tylee's medical records? Oh, I think I did answer this question. I don't think anyone would at this point. I mean, because only Lori and Joe would have had that access. Oh, someone asked, do we know if Kay and Adam still talk? I don't know that. Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. It seemed like I don't know. I don't want to speculate. Okay. Friday Tidy asked, is it true that Lori was sexually inappropriate with Alex, like jumping up on him with her legs wrapped around him? I recall a wife of someone in the family talking about it. And then a wife, question mark. Yeah, so that was Alex's ex-wife, Debbie. She's actually one of the few people who went to police of her own volition, which I just really respected. But yeah, she was the one who talked about that was part of the reason she divorced Alex pretty early on in their marriage. She said that Alex and Lori were inappropriate, but she primarily came forward to say that she knew that Alex had a plan to try to provoke Joe into a fight, but it was really just so he would be able to kill him and it would be justifiable, something to that effect. And so when she heard that that Alex said he killed Charles in self-defense, she came forward, which again I just think is so admirable. Okay, let's see. All right, those are all the questions from the last one. Oh, someone said the mic is blowing out a bit. Okay. Someone said, I think your sound is on for notifications, dings when we text here. I don't ever have sound on for notifications. So I wonder if someone else is hearing that. Is everyone hearing a ding? Because I'm not, so I don't know how that would happen. Okay. Shirley asked, I assumed Miss Vallow and Mr. Vallow weren't sealed in the temple because they claimed her bishop issued a temple recommend well after the marriage. Were they ever sealed? I have no idea. I did think it was interesting, though. This isn't directly pertinent to the question because I really have no idea about that. But I did think it was interesting that when they had gotten back together, even though neither of their hearts were in this, like Charles was talking with a lot of other women. I don't say that in judgment. He was talking with a lot of other women, and that was just in Google chat. So we don't even know about like text messages and dating apps and stuff. But just in Google chat alone, he was talking with 16 other women and was not talking about Lori in favorable terms. And meanwhile, Lori was, she just wanted to get his finances in order. In other words, to make sure that she was listed as the beneficiary. And we found out, oddly enough, at Lori's trial, or it might have been Chad's trial, one of the trials, that for a while, Charles did change the policy. Like he made Kay the beneficiary. Then at some point he made Lori the beneficiary again. I remember it was sometime after she had moved back in. And then at some point he switched it back to Kay. But one thing that was interesting was Charles had sent Lori an email. It was like setting up this sealing that the two of them were going to do. I think he had like a couple of names, and they were going to do some kind of sealing in the temple. So it's just so strange to me that like here they were living in the same home. She's like, ew, I had sex with a zombie, and he's talking with all these other women, talking about his soon-to-be ex-wife. So the whole love always wins thing. First of all, I've said this before. That email where he supposedly said love always wins, that is nowhere to be found in the FOIA docs. So unless that shows up in the FOIA docs, I don't believe that Charles sent that, because he was not operating under a love always wins mentality. Excuse me. And so, but I just thought it was so strange. So it was like, here there was all this animosity, but then they're like, okay, let's go seal these people in the temple. I guess so. I think probably like the thing that they do for the dead or something. I don't know. Okay. Senga, hey, asked, do you think Lori wants to get revenge on the people she feels now betrayed her? 1000%. I think that is the primary motivator of her representing herself. I think it started with her saying something that made the the office of the public defender's office, I guess it is, of Maricopa County, say, we can't represent you anymore because you said something that affects our, I forget how they put it, but basically their ability to, well, anyway, so it sounds like because of the case they reference, she said something that jeopardized their objectivity in another case. So I suspect, because there are no, the only open case I know of that has anything to do with Lori is Colby's case, because they didn't close out that case completely, so they can pursue prosecution down the road. And since this happened within a week of her interview with Colby, and there was also a psych eval ordered, I suspect, like I've talked about before, I suspect that she really had a colossal meltdown and may have said something about Colby that then put their objectivity at risk. So they were like, we can't defend you. But that doesn't mean, that just meant that the public defender's office couldn't defend her. It didn't mean that like no public defenders, because there are also like, I guess, private public defenders and stuff. I'm not really sure how all of that works. But I did some research like when this was all like first going down. And but I suspect that was the moment that Lori was like, fine, I'll just defend myself, because I know all of these people better than anyone. She knows the case better than any public defender would. She doesn't know the law, but she still has help with that. I would hate to be in that person's shoes, but anyway, but I personally believe that her core motivation is she wants to feel powerful again, and she's already seen like that power in effect today with Lori and Janice being there. So yeah, I think everyone who she feels betrayed by, she absolutely will want to get revenge. In the meantime, for those of us who just want to know the truth, I think that, you know, we're going to find out a lot more details. I also suspect that because she'll put more of this evidence at play, there will be less evidence redacted in the FOIA docs, which is my main concern. That said, I don't want to, I really try to monitor, you know, like my own internal thoughts and try to remind myself, this means a lot of people are probably in great duress. So I don't ever want to like make light of that, or, you know, in any way, like kind of rejoice in their suffering. But I am encouraged. I feel like we'll get more information that is currently being obfuscated. Okay, Kathleen asked, can Lori call Chad as a witness? If so, maybe that's the entire reason she wants to represent herself. She wants to talk to Chad. I imagine, yeah, she could call him as a witness. I think it would be a little risky because she doesn't really know where he stands, and she is very sensitive to humiliation. And I think that that's part of the reason she, you know, what got her to this point. So that will, I wondered about the same thing, because, you know, he certainly like was involved. I don't know that he would be able to exculpate her, like he doesn't have evidence like, well, yeah, that morning she was with me. She couldn't have been there. Like, we already know she was there, and the evidence, yeah, I mean, there are going to be many issues with this case because of a lot of the oversights by Chandler Police. So I don't think it's going to be a slam dunk for the state. At the same time, they have so much of Lori and Chad's records from before they started being careful. I mean, even like all of Chad's, ratings of people and stuff. So Chad, if she did call him as a witness, there's the risk that he would also be a hostile witness because he doesn't want to, be prosecuted himself. He doesn't want to be charged with these murders. And Chandler Police did recommend that the prosecutor's office also charge Chad, but the prosecutor's office passed on that. I think in part because they're like, oh, we barely have the evidence to go after Lori because of some of the things that would be questioned. Like, oh, did you run gunshot residue? Did you do this? Did you do that? So I don't know. I mean, these are all questions I've bandied about in my own mind. Okay, Pamela asked, will we hear about all the cars Colby got, the money? She walked right by Charles' body. Zulema. Okay, I don't know what this she walked right by Charles' body meant. So I do imagine that Lori will question Colby about those things, and not so much because it's really pertinent to the case, so the state will probably object. But yeah, I mean, when I put myself in Colby's shoes, there's just so much. There's the pool party, there was the whatever that transaction was with the car, and I don't mean a financial transaction, but it was pretty sketch. Like even Ian's sister had said she felt really uncomfortable because when Ian and Melanie left and no longer needed the car because Melanie was using the Rogue when she was in Phoenix with Ian's family. So they were staying at Ian's sister's house. And when they left for Vegas to go get hitched, they just left the Rogue in front of Ian's sister's house. And then she said she came home for lunch and it was gone. So, she talked about that was pretty weird. And so, someone would have come and gotten the car, ostensibly, probably Colby. But, Lori could ask him about what he did with the car, because if past his prologue, we know that Lori left an envelope of money in Charles' truck for Alex to pick up, and that's a good way to not have a paper trail and stuff. So she could have done the same thing for Colby. She could have left money in the glove box and the key, and the money was to get the car cleaned, so yeah, but she would also have access. We have never gotten access to Colby's interview with Gilbert Police. We only have the very terse notes about it. But she would have access to all of these things. All of the, the police report, like there were many pages that were like fully redacted, and she has access to all of the unredacted, content. Like, so even like the email that that Kay sent about Tylee and about her, admitting to Lori and Charles recently that this allegation she made wasn't true, but they just like left some of the parts redacted, but they left quite a bit unredacted. Lori would have access to that full email, to question Kay about. And it certainly sounds like Kay was saying that that Tylee had recently confessed to Lori and Charles that she had made up the allegations against Joe, when in reality, Tylee never made an outcry against Joe. So, so all of these things that we've been wondering about, all of the redactions, especially the protection of Melanie Gibb. So Melanie Gibb was heavily protected, not only in the police reports that came out of Arizona, but also in the trials. Now, the trials, I can somewhat understand she was a witness for the state, but the police reports, they actually reported something that was not even true in the police report, which was compiled and released to the public more than a year after all of this happened, close to 2 years. But it actually said, I forget the details now, but it affirmed that Melanie did not lie to police. And when she did, and so anyway, so yeah, so all of that protection, that's going to be removed. And Melanie certainly wasn't careful in what she put in text messages. We just don't know about her text messages because police never got a dump of her phone or David Warwick's phone. And so we only know tidbits of what they've kind of cherry picked from what they got from the dump of Lori's phone. So anyway, so I think a lot of people who we have seen be very heavily protected, that they're just not going to be protected. And there is no way Melanie Gibb is going to be able to, well, I shouldn't say no way. I think it's highly improbable, given all of her interviews and, a lot of her, I don't know, her attempts at trying to present herself as above it all, and Lori was evil, and, all of these things. I just don't think that there will be any chance at Lori relenting in going after her. So, yeah, it's going to be very, very awkward. The money, so again, we only know the total that Colby received from Tylee's account after she was murdered. And by knowing how much Tylee was getting in SSI a month, it was the total that Colby got was a little bit more than her SSI for those months. I don't have all of those numbers. They're out on the channel, so you can just search A Murderous Heart for that. But what we don't know is the money she sent from her Venmo accounts, and she had two. I think she also, I know she had a Cash App account, and I know that she sent him money via this Cash App account, but I think she had two Cash App accounts. I don't know if anyone who watched the trial remembers that, but I'm pretty sure she had two Cash App accounts. So, we could learn those amounts. There's a lot. There's a lot of information that could spill out from this trial. Oh, Love My Puppies asked, do you think Lori will cross-examine Melanie Gibb? Oh, absolutely. If the state calls her as a witness, and I imagine they will, yeah, I mean, that will be part of her job as her own attorney. She'll be cross-examining anyone the state calls, unless she just says, I don't have any questions for this witness. But yeah, I do wonder, and again, I don't say this like with any kind of relishing, but I do wonder if we'll get some insight into the reason for Detective Moffat's comment to Kay about not trusting Adam, or he actually made it to Kay's brother. I think it was Bobby. But anyway, that Kay shouldn't trust Adam, and there was a reference to, because Adam may have called Lori. Was it Lori? I think it was Lori after talking to Charles. It was something to that effect. Again, that video is also out on the channel, so you can search for that snippet of that interview. But Lori would have access to, a lot of this information. And they have Alex's phone records, so she would have access to anything that anyone texted Alex, unless Alex deleted them. But they weren't telling Alex to delete, and they didn't even tell him to delete his GPS data and his location data. So she and Chad deleted theirs, but Alex's was pinging all over the place. So, there is a lot, and we don't even know what we don't know, because all we know is what was played in these trials, which was very little. I mean, very little of what we didn't already know. I think Chad's brought more information to light than Lori's, because obviously Chad's attorney had no incentive to protect anyone. But yeah, there could be all kinds of information. And again, because Lori was knee deep in all of this, she knows what to look for. Okay. It's weird that if Colby hates Joe Ryan, why keep his name? Yes, I agree. I did think it was interesting at the trial. I think this was Lori's trial when Colby was at, yeah, it was, because I was there for it. When Colby was asked if Joe adopted him, he said he didn't know. Now, do I think he doesn't know if he was adopted? No, I think he knows that he wasn't adopted. But I do suspect that, he knew he would be questioned. Well, wait a minute. If you weren't even adopted, like if your mom just changed your name, which we know that's what happened, why did you keep the name Ryan? And it's quite straightforward to change your name. Like one of my kids, after all of this, like my kids really, when I got divorced, they really wanted me to change my name back to Ryan, but I didn't want to have a different last name from them. One of my kids is in the process of just waiting for the court date. She changed her name back to Ryan. She was like, okay, I've waited long enough, for this case to kind of clear up, and she did. But it's very straightforward. So yeah, I don't know, but oh, Mom Jeans, hey Mom Jeans, do you think Lori is smart enough to try to implicate her? I think, yeah, I meant to implicate the others without burying herself in front of the jurors. So I think that is one of the risks that knowing Lori, she has probably underestimated. So there is the chance, like, she could be like, like one of those horrible nature videos. I can't watch them, but I unfortunately saw one of, like, I think it was like a mountain lion and a goat or something. And they were like the mountain lion was trying to get the goat and the goat was running, and then they ended up, like they were running down the mountain, and then both of them just tumbled off the side of the mountain. And I think, we that is one of the risks that she runs, because she's not very intelligent. I do think that she probably has really tried to study the law, and she has nothing but time on her hands. And I think at this point now, she's pretty driven, like, because revenge is a very powerful motivator for her, and she's also very driven by power, and so I think that she is going to operate at capacity of what she can actually do. And I think in some ways she's really going to embarrass herself, and in other ways I think she's really going to hang in there, because she's not completely on her own. Like, and I didn't realize this, that when someone decides to represent themselves, like, they still have access to counsel, to like consult and stuff. So I suspect she's getting help with like writing briefs. I did think it was interesting, like with the handwritten brief that she submitted, she did reference multiple cases and stuff. So, so yeah, I do think that there is that risk. I think when it comes to details about Joe's death, though, she's probably going to be fairly safe, because anyone she questions will have the same motivation to not reveal that, how much they knew. So I think in that regard, she'll be safe. But I think in these other regards, I suspect at this point, Lori is so driven to get revenge, I don't think she cares. I think she intuitively knows she's never leaving Idaho. She has multiple life sentences. So she kind of has nothing to lose. Like, even if one of her life sentences was overturned, or she was granted a new trial or something like that, she still has other life sentences, and so I think in her mind, it's whatever risk she is assuming, it's worth it to be able to get this revenge, to be able to feel powerful. Like, she won't be this tiny little woman sitting between two big guys who are arguing her case. She can't make arguments for herself. She couldn't even stop Jim Archibald from chucking Chad under the bus. I mean, he basically went with the dork defense in his closing statements, like, no one's following this guy. Are you kidding me? And she was visibly angry about that. So now I think it's going to be worth it to her. Like, she knows that people are going to be making fun of her, but I think she also knows that people are like, yeah, we want to know how sketch Melanie Gibb was, Summer, a lot of these people who have, had so far they've had a lot of latitude to be able to basically write their own narrative. And for the most part, there aren't too many people out there questioning, like, wait a minute, this contradicts what you said over here. So, yeah, there's risk, but and if she feels like she has little to lose, I agree with her. I mean, she basically almost has nothing to lose. Haley asked, hey, Haley, how is the petition going regarding Joe's death? I am not even sure. Let me see if I can pull that up really quickly. Where maybe I have that in here. I know it's in here somewhere. Yeah, I'm not sure. Maybe someone else can pull it up. Oh, wait, I just found it. 12,000. So, yeah, anytime it reaches, some kind of a new benchmark, is like, oh, but when you get to 15,000, but all along is like when you get to 2,000, when you get to 5,000, when you get to 10,000, So, yeah, if you haven't signed it, oh gosh, why didn't I share it while I was in here? Yeah, if you haven't signed it, it's just basically a petition for Phoenix police to open an investigation into Joe's death. Anyway, okay. What's your guess as to whom has been subpoenaed to testify for either the state or the defense? I think with the last trial, the subpoenas went out surprisingly late, so I don't know that they have subpoenaed. Maricopa County doesn't give you the same access to court documents that Idaho did. Like, I was actually able to pull up the documents. I think with Maricopa County, I don't know if you have to be a reporter or have a paid account. I'm not really sure. I don't know what the process is. So if anyone knows, if you could email amurderousheart@gmail.com, I'd appreciate it. I just haven't spent time looking at that. But I think for the state, it will be definitely Lori's family members. So, Colby, Summer, Adam, maybe Zach, Cox. Not really sure. Who else was there? And then the friends. So Melanie Gibb, Zulema, and none of them have any kind of plea deal in Arizona that I know of. But also they didn't really investigate. Like, they didn't really investigate Alex's death. And so, yeah, they just kind of were like, oh, well, okay. The autopsy came back natural causes. So, that's good enough for us. But, yeah, it's, like their whole, like her whole little, prayer group. Not really sure who else. Yeah, and then all of the people who actually investigated. So Detective Moffat, all of the detectives with Chandler. There will probably be some pulled in from like the FBI, because they ran some of the phone records. And who knows, maybe even some of the investigators from Idaho. I don't know. But for the defense, I don't know. I don't know. Like, she could have people who are hostile witnesses. She, subpoenas, and they don't really want to defend her. We just don't know. But she'll probably have a psychologist or psychiatrist. Yeah, I don't really know, but I think it's most likely going to be pretty slim pickings. You know, she could have someone, I don't know if there's a fund for this, but you know, someone to analyze the trajectory analysis. So they did do some minimal trajectory analysis, and there was some suspicion. There was a reference. Now, this was heavily redacted, but it was in the Chandler police report. And it was in reference to after they moved Charles' body, they were suspicious of the markings on the floor. So it sounded like there was something in the directionality that the bullet took, or the round took, when it grazed the floor, that caused them to have suspicion about someone's claim. So, you know, but she could bring in someone to challenge those findings, because there are also references in the police report saying that, I think it was something to the effect of like the evidence was in keeping with Alex's claims. And I mean, just even looking at the pictures, and I did 2 lives about that investigation and taking deep dives into the pictures that 2 reporters, well, 1 reporter, I think, graciously passed off to me. But it's like the evidence was not at all in keeping with Alex. Well, I shouldn't say at all, but there were many details that contradicted his claim. Like the fact that there was a round in the baseboard that didn't have any blood. It didn't have any blood. And there was no blood anywhere on the floor. There was no blood spatter. And then there's, you know, what appears to be an unspent round chilling in the middle of the floor. It wasn't in keeping with any of Alex's or Lori's claims. So, you know, if she has someone who is willing to testify for her, for the defense, they could certainly tear apart the investigation. I think that I suspect that this trial will heavily rely much more on like witness testimony and like emails and stuff like that, than the actual forensics, because there were so little forensics done. So maybe I'll be pleasantly surprised. But okay, so that was Mel. And then Mom Jeans again. Will Julie Rowe be on a witness list for either side, given this trial centers around Charles, events leading up to his murder, infidelity, publishing background, etc.? I highly doubt either side will call her as a witness. She's just too unreliable. So I'm not even sure that the state will call Janice, because she could be a hostile witness, but I'm also not sure that she would be willing to testify for the defense. So, but no, I think Julie Rowe, yeah, I just think she's, you know, I think that there are really significant mental health issues that would make her a very unreliable witness. Lindsay Blake hinted that another prosecution was in the pipeline. Who do you think it's for, and do you think it will actually happen? I don't think it will happen. I think I've seen a pattern with Idaho, and I mean no disrespect to the men and women who investigated and successfully prosecuted those cases. I am indebted to them. I have the highest respect for them. Having said all of that, I have seen a tendency to kind of say what they know, what people want to hear, because it just does so well. And I think it, you know, I think it comes from like a place of kind intentions, just kind of like, oh, these poor people, they 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 know that there were others involved who should be prosecuted. At the top of that list is Melanie Pulaski. But I mean, Melanie Gibb, Zulema, they are like right behind her. But I asked when I was out there, my first trip out to Idaho, I spoke to two members of Rexburg Police Department, and I asked them if there was any chance that there would be any other prosecutions. And they said no, they didn't think so. That the evidence just wasn't there. Now, at that time, I didn't know that they hadn't pulled Melanie Gibbs' phone records. But yeah, so I think, it's such a small city. And I think I can't even imagine the resources that went into not one, but two separate trials, just to get those prosecutions. So, so it could have been a financial decision. It could have been that maybe at the time that they kind of, struck the deal with Zulema, and clearly, not clearly, apparently had some kind of arrangement with Melanie Gibb, even though there was nothing official on the record. It does seem like there was some kind of deal in exchange for her getting that recording. I've talked about this before. There were two different calls with Rexburg police before she called Gilbert, and she was actually told by someone from Rexburg police to reach out to Gilbert police when she called to come clean about having lied about having had JJ. So then, when you consider that with the fact that, okay, they pulled a dump of Kay's phone, but not Melanie Gibb or, Dave's phone, when they were they were in the house with JJ when he was murdered. And there were a lot of sketch interactions, and also, while I'm on that point, if you think back to the interview Melanie Gibb had with Rexburg police that took place in Arizona, the one where she almost seemed like she was on speed, like she was really skitsy. I think that she was nervous. I know other people had thought like she was, on something. I did ask someone who knew her well, if this person thought that there was any chance that Melanie would be on drugs, and this person said absolutely not. Many issues, but no, I don't think that she would ever take drugs. I think she was just that nervous. But there was one point where they asked her if she had this text exchange that she had with Lori when Lori texted her on Sunday evening and said, I'm, putting JJ back down or something like that. And you could tell, like, Melanie, like, she has no poker face. This look of surprise and what looked like nervousness, came over her face. She started sucking water. She was clearly nervous. And she was like, oh, no, I deleted that. I was just so freaked out. I probably should have kept it. So she's just like nervous, chattering. And then Lieutenant Hermosillo said, that's okay. We can get it. And so I always wondered about that. I was like, you can get it. Like, you already have it, like I thought maybe it was like a deleted exchange or something and they didn't have like the backup. I never thought like, oh no, they actually didn't have her phone records. Again, this isn't a criticism, but where I'm going with this is that then Melanie loses her mind. Like she's like, okay, say it again. And she was just so weird. Like he is, like repeating it, and she's like repeating it after him like every few words. So she's buying time. She's like, what do I say, what do I say? But now we know, okay, no, she was freaking out. Like the threat there was Lieutenant Hermosillo was basically saying, that's okay, we can get a dump of your phone. And then Melanie was like, oh, no, 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 no. Okay, what is it that you want to know? So, I always thought that that was kind of a curious thing. But then after the trial, I was like, oh, okay, that's why she was freaking out so badly. But anyway, so, it'll be interesting to find out, did that courtesy extend to Arizona? Like, did Arizona also not get a dump of her phone? Because again, they got a dump of Kay's. They got a dump of Brandon's when Brandon was the victim. I don't know if they got a dump of Colby's, but they got the Venmo records of and his text exchanges with Tylee. So I'm assuming they probably, got something, like, because they were interviewing him at their apartment. So I doubt that they were just like, okay, let me just like take a bunch of screenshots and text them to myself. I don't know. Maybe they have mobile equipment. But here they got phone records for all of these people who were like clearly, victims. And then here's Melanie Gibb, who, anyway, so I don't know. But no, I don't think that there's going to be another prosecution. And I'd so much rather be pleasantly surprised if there is, and then hold out any kind of hope and then be disappointed. I just try to keep my world as happy as possible. Like, okay, I've just tried to focus on, okay, the work that these people did was absolutely heroic. The task had to have felt like insurmountable. None of these people, especially like the FBI, okay, they're used to this kind of stuff, but even they messed up. Like, they got Tylee's phone records in October, and they clearly would have seen a significant, precipitous drop-off in her data, and there's no record of them flagging it. Now, they may have, and that conveniently just didn't show up in the police report. But clearly, no one looked at that and said, okay, this is strange. For us, Tylee would have been 17 at that point. For a 17-year-old to all of a sudden have this precipitous drop-off, not a complete and total drop-off. So it wasn't like, oh, she just switched her number, because other people were still accessing her phone and using the data, but it would have been way less than what she had been doing. And no one flagged it. Even when they did the welfare check, no one was like, you know what? Let's revisit this drop off in Tylee's phone data. Of course, also all of the people who had the email that indicated Tylee was in imminent harm. There's no evidence that any of them sent that on to police. So, okay. Pamela asked, what answers do you want to hear most in this first trial, and what would shock you? So before the last trial, or it might have been before Lori's trial, I did a video of like the questions that are still unanswered that I hope to have answered, and those all still remain. Like, really, like, who is the woman in the ring camera footage? That's why I was a little disappointed when I heard Summer was at the hearing today, because I was like, nah, I want to find out if she was the woman, she's had every opportunity to say that she wasn't. It's just kind of like Colby and Kelsey. They've had 5 years to produce even a single photo that's not photoshopped of Tylee at their wedding, and they haven't. And similarly, we've all been debating this point of who the woman was in the Ring camera footage since it was like maybe early February of 2020, and all of that time. Even when Nate asked Summer, is there anything you want to clear up, like for the record, And so he didn't want to ask her directly, hey, low key, was that you? Were you in the Ring camera footage? But yeah, she didn't jump on it. She was like, no, people just believe whatever they want to believe. So I definitely hope to, at some point, and whether it's the FOIA docs or one of these trials, find that out. I would like to know how much money Colby was sent. Like total, not just through Tylee's Venmo. I would really like to know, what did Kay and Jess mean? Jess was Brandon Boudreaux's business partner's wife. So both of them said that their little cadre, their group, knew that the kids were missing in October. So Kay said only JJ. I think Jess was she was rewriting history a little, because none of them were really concerned about Tylee. But I think she just kind of included Tylee, so she wouldn't get backlash. But at minimum, JJ, here they both said, Kay in her their only press conference. Their first press conference in January 2020. They were asked when they first realized that JJ was missing. And originally, excuse me. Originally, Larry said it had been September, but Kay corrected him and said no, it was in October, sometime in October, because the private investigator didn't follow Melanie and Alex up to Rexburg until November 1st. So that means that their cadre knew that JJ was missing, but no one has ever defined what does missing mean. And then the private investigator, Rich Robertson, even said in his interview with Chris Cuomo, he said that people knew the kids were missing, but they weren't all that, or like early on, we knew the kids were missing, but nobody was all that concerned at that point. And again, it's just like all of these references to adults knowing the kids were missing, but no one ever defined, what do you mean? Like, what made them missing? And then if you knew that they were missing, why was a welfare check not called until the end of November, late in November? And so, so that, I don't know if I'll ever get an answer to that. I do hope to see any text message evidence from Tylee. So we haven't, there's been very little of Tylee's text messages introduced in either of the trials. We know that Colby texted her the day before she was murdered, at some point, September 8th. And we know that she told him she wasn't in control of her money. And we know that then Colby got the money from Lori because there was a Venmo transfer on September 8th. And that was from Lori's account, not Tylee's. But yeah, so I do hope to find out like if Tylee was texting anyone. I don't know that that would really come out in this trial though, because it wouldn't really benefit the state or the defense unless, you know, unless Lori just throws all caution to the wind and decides just to be vengeful, you know, to allow some of this evidence to come out. I do also wonder if any text message exchanges she may have had with Melanie Gibb about Tylee, if Lori will bring those out. I do strongly suspect she will do that because she'll try to make the case of like, you know, like you saw how irascible she was. Not that she would use that word. She doesn't know what that means. But, you know, like I forget that. I mean, even when Melanie knew she was under the microscope, she couldn't help herself. She still had to take swipes at Tylee. So she clearly really didn't like Tylee. And I can imagine and Tylee made it clear to her that she didn't like her. Yeah, so I'm sure there are other things. I just can't think of them off the top of my head. The other question was, what would shock you? You know, I hesitate to say, like, I can't imagine much of anything shocking me at this moment. But yeah, it's always a possibility. I think the thing that surprised me most at Lori's trial was, you know, in part of it, like I think I was really surprised by how emotional I was. Like I wasn't emotional with like a lot of the gory details. Not that I wasn't affected by it, but the details of like what Chad and company did to Tylee after she was murdered, that doesn't affect me quite as much because, you know, like on some level, I was like, oh, the jury is going to hate him for this. So, so those details didn't affect me as much. It was finding out like the details that probably wouldn't have really meant as much to other people, but like the details of Tylee's last week in particular, like little details like that, you know, one of her last, if not her last, purchase was at McDonald's and a gas station. And, you know, just kind of reading between the lines, it was like, well, wait a minute. They were traveling as a family from Arizona to Idaho. They clearly stopped in Utah, and that's where this purchase was made. And I think that's where they also spent the night. But I was like, was she just left to buy her own gas and even like pay for her own McDonald's? There could be other explanations for it, but you know, it's just, and then the finding out, well, no, I already knew that she had called a friend when she was on her way up to Idaho because she was lonely and didn't want to travel by herself. But yeah, just finding out some of those details. And again, like I don't want to put like an unfair spotlight on Colby, but the detail of, you know, Colby texting her for money and then, her telling him she doesn't have control, and just knowing, like, if there was like any hope in her that like he would confront their mom. Like, wait a minute, right? That's what Tylee has to live on. Why have you taken control of her money? And then, to know, like, when they were talking about that, the timing of it, it's like, I knew, like, Tylee had hours to live at that point. So I don't put that on Colby. Obviously, Colby didn't know that Tylee had hours to live. But hearing some of these details with the knowledge of what happened to her, that stuff really, really got to me. So, so any details like that could be shocking. But I think that there is the possibility that there could be very shocking details, because I just think that some of these people have been so protected, that there could be things said in text messages, in emails, that may really, really be surprising. So, yeah, I on some level, I do, as much as I want to know the truth. Like, there's been this drive to find out the victims' stories, their actual stories, not a lot of these revisionist stories, but their actual stories. I can empathize with people who probably are experiencing a lot of anxiety. And, one thing we've seen, even with some of the details that have come out in these FOIA documents, there could be something that someone says where they chuck someone else under the bus. So that evidence is played, but it's almost like a buy one, get one free, where you're like, wait a minute, that person, said this. So I don't know. I mean, I think we're just going to have to prepare for a really wild ride. I ran out of water. But yeah, I am considering flying out for this trial. Someone did graciously offer for me to stay with them, and I am considering that. We'll see. How do you think a jury will look at Lori's credibility because she is representing herself, if that makes sense? Oh yeah, it makes perfect sense. I mean, I think Lori is going to have no credibility, but they have an impetus to hear all of the evidence and make a decision accordingly. So I was really impressed by the sincerity of the jurors in both of the Idaho cases. And I do think that for the most part, jurors do take their responsibility pretty seriously. I think a lot like Idaho, I think some people who are picked for jury duty or, receive a summons, there will probably be people who really, really want to be a juror and will just say whatever it takes to become a juror. But then once they're a juror, I think they'll take it pretty seriously. I don't think the details will be quite as difficult as they were for the Idaho juries. Not that it's not, it's always difficult to see pictures of, a dead person, to hear these details. It's still a very disturbing case, and I'm not in any way making light of Charles' suffering. But a lot of the jurors did mention it was the fact that these were kids, and then like the really egregious state of Tylee's remains, and then the fact that JJ was so young and special needs. Like, those were a lot of complicating factors that add a really significant emotional toll. So I don't think that there will be quite as much of that. Oh, one thing I do think that could be surprising, and I'm tiptoeing through the tulips on this. I think that Lori could have evidence of, like any evidence that she has about Charles, either in his threats, anything he might have texted, like Adam or Kay, or something like that. She would have now access to all of those records, and she might have already. I don't know, but I think I think there could be, unfortunately, I think that there could be details that come out that are really difficult, especially for people who kind of, want to have perfect victims. And I'm not going to get back on that soapbox. I've already addressed that. And that has been a pattern I've seen in this case since very early on, where it's like people put victims through, like they make them run the gauntlet, and these are victims who they're not even alive to defend themselves, and if they make it to the other end of the gauntlet, and are fully intact, so they lived perfectly moral lives, and were never sketch and stuff, then we'll have compassion for them. So I think that there could be some tensions in the real world, in the real the true crime community, like some clashes over that, because you kind of have the people who are like, really, really judgmental. They really just don't seem to even try to put themselves in the shoes of some of these victims, living and deceased. Then you have the other end of the spectrum, where the people are like, it's the only kindness is to cover any detail about a victim, and any talk about even facts is seen as uncouth, it's cruel, it's judgmental, and I see myself as kind of more in the middle. I really try to stay as in the middle as possible, and at times I am like Ratevia from oh, well, what is, I just blanked on the name of that musical. Anyway, the Jewish father. Yeah, anyway. But he was always like, on the one hand, on the other hand, on the one hand, on the other hand, but on the one hand, and that's me, like really trying to split hairs to be as fair as possible. But just with some of the details that we've seen in the police reports that have been left unredacted, I think I think there could be more of those details that come out, and so it will be Lori's. I suspect that her primary defense will be, if she had even comes close to acknowledging any role that she had, I think she's probably going to try to paint herself as an almost victim. Like, if Alex hadn't have killed Charles, she would have been the victim. And I talked about this, and there was quite a bit of clapback for it, but some of these details, they're going to come out. They're going to come out in this trial, and one of those details was the last website Charles looked at was a life insurance website. And I've always kind of had this tucked in the back of my mind, like, these are the details that I share with Janice, where I'm like, okay, and what is this about? Because it was an insurance company that had never come up. And then we found out, I think it was in Lori's trial, that company, I can't think of the name of it now, but she had a $2 million policy with that company. And that's the only policy that's come up that's tied to that company, and so, he dealt with annuities and life insurance plans. So is there the possibility that this was work related? Yes, but he was also in Phoenix. He was about to go on I think he was about to go on a date, or maybe it was right after the date. And he was on his personal, like it was his cell phone. He wasn't on a laptop. So, it's possible that it was work related, but it's also possible that it wasn't, and so I think more details like that could come out, and they're going to be bandied about in front of a jury. So yes, thank you, Anna. Fiddler on the Roof. Okay. 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 And this is not, I can honestly say, like, God is my witness, I have never dropped like one of my own questions. I've never even created a sock puppet account around this case, except for like the Arctic feline account with Cool Cats, and that was just so that we could like interview people. But I went with Arctic feline because it wouldn't let me create an account called Cool Cats. But that is literally the only sock puppet account, and that was an admin thing. So I feel a little apprehensive about answering questions about Colby. But okay, so Knife Frame asked, Colby certainly does seem to be overinvested in protesting that Tylee was at his wedding, but why also reluctant to show evidence? But why? What is being concealed here, do you think? I mean, honestly, I think the thing that's being concealed is that Tylee wasn't at their wedding. Again, it is not even like it's just my claim. Like, I was told this. Zach confirmed that she wasn't there, but though offered a different explanation. And then, Colby and Kelsey themselves, Kelsey said that she was on a ski trip, and but yeah, and then Colby added to that, like he said something to the effect of, it literally breaks his heart that there are no family pictures with Tylee at their wedding, so on the one hand, you could interpret that to mean like the actual family picture, but quite honestly, I don't even believe their claim that the family pictures were taken before the wedding. I just don't. Like, those family pictures, they're taken after the wedding. And I don't remember if Kelsey, I don't remember if she was wearing a veil. Maybe I can look that up really quickly. But if she was, like it's the norm for, and even if she wasn't, like, prettier people are pretty sentimental about like the groom and bride not seeing each other beforehand and stuff. But yeah, so I just think, when they decided to like kind of pivot and say, oh no, she was at the wedding, then they kind of had to explain why she wasn't in the pictures. Now, Lori had told me that Tylee got there after the photographer left. But the photographer stays for the whole wedding, and so yeah, so I just it's just very strange. But at this point, it's like, okay, they've, like I said, they've had 5 years. Like, this has been discussed for 5 years now. For quite a while, they didn't address it. So really, I think the first time they ever even addressed it, yeah, so she did have a veil. So, ostensibly that veil would have been, like in front of her, and then it's customary for the groom to, pull the veil back. So if they had taken the pictures in the morning, like, she would have had to, like, have the veil back and then pull it forward for the wedding. So again, not impossible, but I do think it's pretty improbable. But I think, once that picture was floating out there, and I think they felt like they had some plausible deniability, like, oh, now we have a picture of her. All right, like I thought it was interesting that even when Colby went through all these details of, like, like, Tylee was even supposed to be a bridesmaid, but she had a panic attack, and all this stuff. I just think no, I forgot what I was going to say, but anyway, yeah, I just think, like, oh yeah, once this picture was out there, then they had this plausible deniability, and oh, I thought it was interesting that even when he was sharing these details of, like, he doesn't want to blame anyone, so even that kind of came across like, I don't want to speak ill of the dead, but for some reason, like, Tylee just was, like, gone, and then they had to get her back, and she was just late for the wedding. But the photographer stays for the whole wedding, and like I said, I mean, I wouldn't have any reason to lie about it. Like, I saw all the pictures, and because of Tylee's reaction when Lori asked me if I wanted to see the pictures from the wedding, she left. That already kind of made me curious. So, but yeah, so yeah, I think, like, at this point, if they produce the pictures, then it will be like, okay, so why did Zach lie? And why did, Colby and Kelsey talk about her being on this ski trip, which they didn't bring up the ski trip. Now it was just like she was on, I think, a trip with a friend or something. I really just, I didn't want to listen to the live. I just used AI to find his references to me. And because one of my mods told me that he actually mentioned my name. But anyway, so yeah, I don't know but I mean, that's what I suspect the explanation is. That but I do think that now Kelsey kind of backed them into a corner by saying, they'll post the videos, so we'll see. Okay, do you think Colby felt entitled to half of Tylee's money, first alimony, and after Joe passed to SS? We really need to kind of be a little more careful with these questions, because I get to most of them, but sometimes they're just so opaque. I don't know how to answer them. So I will answer the first part. If I thought Colby felt entitled to half of Tylee's money. No, I don't. I think I do believe him when he says that before Tylee's death, like, she, just, like, would give him money for, like, gifts and stuff like that. So I don't think that, like, he was getting half of her money. I know that, like, some people have kind of posited that as a theory, that, like, they thought that maybe Tylee was giving him half of the money from her dad's death, and I just no, I don't think Tylee would have been willing to do that. I do think that she was willing to help him financially from time to time, but then once she was gone, it was like, and Colby even said something to the effect of, like, his mom told him, like, Tylee's money is for all of us now, but it really wasn't for the whole family, because it appears that Colby got all of it. Again, just doing the math, he he got all of it. I also thought it was interesting that when he emailed Lori after the welfare check, he didn't say, "Can I have some money?" He actually, forget how he worded it, but it was like, "Can can I get money from?" It was like from the Venmo or something like that. And so it seemed like he was like, excuse me, specifically referencing uh, like Tylee's account, because I just thought that that was like kind of an unusual way to word it. I'll look and see if I can find it. I think I found it. Maybe. No, that wasn't it. Um, Let me. It was okay. um, he said, "Okay, Mom, I love you. Please be smart and take care of the kids and yourself. I don't know what's going on, but I'm praying for all of you. I'm mad and sad, but I know I can't control anything going on. Please be safe, all of you. We love you. And if you can help us at all through Venmo too, that would help." So, but what we know at this time is the only Venmo account that she was using once Tylee died. We found this out at Lori's trial, was Tylee's Venmo. So then when she sent him money, it was through Cash App. And we also know that from the trial. So, again, I just thought it was unusual. Like, he could have just asked for money, but it was like specifically through Venmo. But so no, I don't think he felt entitled to half when she was alive, but I think once she was dead, all he knew is that the money was flowing. He didn't know that she was dead per se, but he wasn't questioning the fact that all of a sudden all of Tylee's money was going to him. Plus, we know that there was also like a trip to Disneyland, and anyway, so yeah. Haley asked, "Did Colby attempt to contact Tylee directly for his money?" Oh, it just moved. For his money, why go through Lori? Yeah, so on September 8th, he contacted Tylee directly, but then Tylee told him that she wasn't in control of her money. And and then obviously after that, all of the contact would have been through Lori, because he then texted Tylee. It was like 4 days after her birthday, and insisted on talking to her that night. And then that's really when you see an uptick in the Venmo transactions. Up to that point, there were 2 Venmo transfers from Lori and then Tylee's account, like right before Tylee's murder and right after. So it was like September 8th and 10th. And then same with JJ. They kind of straddled his murder. And but then once Colby kind of held his mom's feet to the flames in writing, which is a cardinal sin for Lori, I want to talk to her. I think it was like tonight or something like that. That it was after that that text exchange, that's when you see an uptick in the Venmo transfers. Did you find MG interview with police in Idaho creepy? It was like she was flirting with the police while she knew the children were dead. Your thoughts? Yeah, I thought it was creepy, but she is creepy. She's just a very creepy person. Uh, but yeah, I think I saw it as like desperation. I think in her mind, she had no idea if if at any point like she was going to be arrested. So she didn't know if they would have gotten, like a search warrant for her records. I mean, you think about like when someone is engaging in criminal behavior or even just really sketch behavior, we don't know that her behavior was criminal. I do suspect that she was very guilty of at least a co-conspirator, accessory, probably before and after the fact, especially with Charles' murder, with her spending the night there and stuff. But but when someone is engaged in that kind of behavior, you're at peak paranoia, and so she did seem very scared, and it seemed to me like she saw Lieutenant Hermosillo as like the bad guy because he's not LDS, and she was really trying to like butter up Lieutenant Ball, and or at the time it was Detective Hermosillo and Lieutenant Ball. Now it's Lieutenant Hermosillo and Sheriff Ball, but with at the time Lieutenant Ball, I just think she was doing everything in her power to try to keep him in her good graces. So I think it ended up coming across as creepy. And Janice did a really funny video of her flirting with Lieutenant Ball. But yeah, it was, it was creepy. It was cringy. It was all of those things. It was also infuriating because, you just see her trying to act like she wasn't one of them when she clearly was. And, she was, I mean, obviously Melanie Boudreau sat at Lori's right, and she and Zulema were battling it out for who would get to sit at her left, like who would be her number two person. And it looks from their exchanges like it was Melanie Gibb, and then Zulema kind of dialed things up with intimating that she had prophetic insight into Lori's family members dying, that put her a little bit in the running, but Lori was just using her, but Lori, she detects weakness, and so once she sees that someone needs her, she has no respect for them. But she needed Zulema at that point because I think that emboldened her to move forward. But yeah, the thing that will always surprise me with Melanie Gibb is her doing that interview with, oh my gosh, I'm sorry, I'm blanking on his name. Nate Eaton. Oh, gosh. But yeah, knowing what we know, but I think that was emboldened by her knowing that they didn't pull her phone records, so I think she just felt like she dodged a bullet. She came through with this recording, which, interestingly enough, was hardly even used in either of the trials. So yeah, it was. I actually thought it would be used a lot more in chats, and also in Lori's. But anyway, yeah, I don't know. I have so many thoughts about her, but clearly she felt emboldened enough to go into that interview. Well, really playing the part of the hero, of like the naive hero. Do you think Lori is preparing Summer and Janice for their testimony? She can't. No, I don't think so. I don't think that they would take that risk. I think the whole reason they came was to, like, if anyone has seen that like kind of meme video that a lot of people have done voiceovers where, I think it started with a guy trying to placate his wife who was on her time of the month, and he's like doing all these things. He gets all these things, and he's like, "Here you go," and there have been a lot of voiceovers because it's just so funny. And I think that, like, my daughter and I were joking about it today. It was like Summer and Janice were like, "Here you go," like, "Here we are. We're Team Lori. Like, don't eviscerate us." So, but they can't take the risk of calling her, they don't know what's going to come out in a trial, especially because now Lori has access to like these recordings and stuff, so yeah, I don't know. Yeah, but no, I think it would be way too risky. Like, I think they would if they could. But yeah, I think they're probably going to be sweating it out until they know all of the subpoenas are out and they didn't get one. But yeah, the chances of them not calling at least Summer. Again, Janice, I think is a little riskier. Like, they may not call her in Idaho. They didn't call her as a witness for either trial. One, there's the risk of her being a hostile witness, and two, she has said some unusual things. So I think they were just like, we have so much evidence, we don't need to call her. But yeah, so I mean, there are a lot of question marks. But then she was also, at the same time, she was way more involved in the lead up to Charles' murder. I mean, she and Summer were running reconnaissance against Adam, so oh, Sherry asked, what did Joe pass from? How old was he? He was 59, and I mean, I've talked about this before, but they only did an external examination of him. They didn't like cut him open. So they based his cause of death on the combination of his medical records and the medication that he was taking. I've talked about this before, but when I was on a podcast with Nancy Grace, there was a medical examiner who was also on that podcast. We were all talking ahead of time before the podcast actually started. And someone had said, like, well, I think it was maybe Nate had said, well, they ruled his death natural causes. And then I said, well, but they didn't even open him up. Like, they just did an external examination. And the medical examiner who was on that call was like, wait a minute, what? What did you say? And I said, yeah, they didn't. It said in the medical examiner's report, and it wasn't a coroner. It was a medical. It was a medical examiner, but it was based on an external examination, and that medical examiner had said then they shouldn't have ruled the cause of death as natural. He said if they didn't open him up, the most that you can rule it is unknown. And so, that was interesting. I can't confirm that, but he did say that. And I've, kind of held on to that because then Phoenix police based their decision on if they were going to investigate his death on the results of the ME's report. So, yeah. Okay, P.S. Read first. We are all laughing about this question. Do you, oh, okay. Do you think Charles was killed somewhere else? No, I don't. I think he was killed in that living room. I think that there was a cleanup, but it didn't help their cause at all that the gun grazed the floor, and they didn't know. It appears that they didn't move Charles' body. So when Alex said that Charles was standing for both shots, he clearly didn't know. Yeah, you dope. There's evidence that he was down for the second shot because of the round grazing the floor, but then also the medical examiner described it as a shored wound, meaning like when someone's shot, but they're like up against a wall or they're on the floor or up against some kind of hard surface. The wound is different. It's like what they call shored, SHORED. So that didn't help his case. And really that right there was probable cause for them to arrest Alex because he already didn't have a case for justifiable homicide because he said that he had gone to his room but then came back with a gun. And in Arizona, it's not a stand your ground state. If you can get to safety, then the homicide isn't justifiable. So if he had stayed in the room, locked the door, Charles kicked down the door, then the homicide would have been justifiable. But not only did Alex leave safety, come back with a gun, he lied and said he was standing, and clearly he was no longer a threat. And I talked about this in my last live that I did about Charles, because I had never caught this before, but the one of the people who was at the scene noted that like they were surprised at how little bleeding there was at the second entry point. And so I, looked that up. Like, well, okay, they were surprised. What does that mean? Why would they have been surprised? And that is an indicator that the person was either close to death, incapacitated, or already dead, because the first wound bled a lot. So he was alive, the heart was pumping, so it would have been, pumping blood out, but the second wound there was very little blood, so I don't think that they would have killed him somewhere else and moved him to the house because of that detail. But also, there's that issue of there being a round in the baseboard, which is not explained by the round. The first that would have had to have been, if you believed his story, you would have had to believe, and sorry, I should have given a trigger warning far before this point, but you would have had to believe that round penetrated Charles' chest. It also hit his spine. We know that, and then like changed trajectory and went into a baseboard. So I don't think the round in the baseboard ever touched Charles. I think that was a missed shot. But Anyway, so yeah, I know for those reasons, I'm sure there are others, but for those reasons, I think I personally believe that he walked in and was gunned down. I do not believe Lori's claim about the fight. It made no sense. Even when she talked about Charles swinging at Alex with the bat, I mean, she wasn't an athlete. She didn't play, well, I don't know. She wasn't an athlete. But, she talked about Charles, who had been like on a minor league baseball team, swinging at Alex with a backhand. Like, for anyone who has played any serious ball, like, one-handed, you already have like little to no power, but then backhanded, and she had him swinging with his right hand, and he was a southpaw, and so there were just so many, issues with that. But yeah, so I'm sure if I thought about it, there would be other reasons that I think that he was killed in the home, but yeah. Um, okay. Okay. And this is the last question I take. Will you give your thoughts on the court session of this morning, please? To be totally honest, I am in the midst of a huge project with analytics. I didn't watch it. I will at some point, maybe. These hearings, like, I really kind of have to pick and choose, like, with how busy I am. And typically these hearings aren't very interesting to me. They're mostly administrative. So I kind of have to save myself for, like, I am really an information junkie. Like, I want to know information, and so a lot of this stuff, like, our mod chat, people post funny videos of, like, yeah, Lori, like, putting her hands up on the table and the handcuffs clinking. And I do think it's kind of funny that, like, they have her handcuffed. Like, I don't know what the difference is between Arizona and Idaho. But yeah, I don't even know if there was a ruling about her wearing street clothes. I think for the trial, they probably will, because she's in front of a jury and they want to humanize the defendant as much as possible. But yeah, at least for these hearings, I think they're like, there's no jury. She doesn't get to play dress up, and she's in handcuffs. So yeah, one of the mods also sent a video of, like, her foot fidgeting. So she was clearly nervous. There was a lot of pressure on her, but, like, you could see the cuffs jangling. But yeah, yeah, I haven't. Yeah, I don't really. I just thought it was interesting when I found out that Summer and Janice were there. Really, for me, that was the most interesting thing of the whole hearing. So I was like, they have kissed the ring. But yeah, okay. So on that note, we will wrap things up. Good to be back, and yeah, we'll see each other in a couple weeks, and we'll just keep this going as much as I can until Lori's trial. And yeah, especially if I'm actually able to go to at least parts of the trial. It would be kind of nice to go and not be a family member, like, not have to sit, like, be forced to sit with, like, in the family section and stuff, and I get to actually be with people I know. But also, I really didn't have much interest in this trial until Lori decided to represent herself. Now, this trial, I think at minimum, it is going to be very interesting. Like, there is not going to be very many dull moments. So Yeah. And someone did tell me that she requested a larger courtroom, which again, I thought that that was very insightful. It really shows, like, you know, she's not trying to shrink away from the camera, like when she was in Idaho, where she was like turning her, you know, turning sideways and, you know, playing to the camera a little bit, but not really that much. Now she, you know, she has, um, you know, I don't know, main character energy going. So that at bare minimum, it should prove to be a very, very interesting trial. Okay, on that note, see you in a couple weeks.